What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. This video is going to be predominantly talking about the hurricane threat for those of you living in the Lesser Antilles, as well as areas in Puerto Rico, and maybe into Hispaniola if we have time towards the end, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at, as well as just kind of an overall synoptic overview of what we've been seeing over the last week in the Caribbean right here. So here's what we are seeing right here, at least with the satellite imagery right here. We can go ahead and find a region right here if we can do that real quickly for the Western Atlantic region. Here's the situation that we have right here. We're having a lot of clusters of thunderstorms just starting to organize and develop across much of the Caribbean Sea. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because, no, there's not really much of a chance for this to organize or develop or anything like that. I don't see that as a possibility. This year is just still too strong for that. But I'm talking about more of a long-term threat with this, because what I'm seeing with these isolated and scattered thunderstorms across the Caribbean right here is what it's doing is pretty interesting, and it's going to be really detrimental to what might be happening in the next couple of months or so. I mean, I'd say when I say detrimental, I mean detrimental to people who are possibly going to get affected by this, not detrimental to the hurricane season. In fact, this is great for the hurricane season right here, because what's going on is these clusters of thunderstorms right here, they're not really cooling off the global sea temperatures, the SSTs or anything like that. We can go ahead and show you what's going on with it right here. We can go ahead and refresh the page and give you the North Atlantic. Yeah, the North Atlantic is still surging right there. It's still a few tenths of a degree across the Atlantic Ocean warmer than last year, and that's expected to continue throughout the year right here. And here's the SST anomaly map for you right here. Still very warm, above average. It's not really cooling off these sea surface temperatures right here, or anything along the like of that. I wish they would. It would mitigate the hurricane threat, but that's not how this works, unfortunately. They're too small to really have much of an impact on that. What I'm referring to when it comes to this is allowing for a lot more moisture in the region, and moisture is a pretty key component for hurricane development, because if you have a massive area of dry air, it's going to choke the hurricane out right there if it starts to organize and develop. That's why you're not seeing very many tropical waves. That not just with the shear, but also the fact that there is a significant amount of Sahara dust in the eastern part of the Atlantic Ocean. I know there's like four or five tropical waves out right now, but they're not really developing just because of those two factors right there. The air is just too dry in the eastern Atlantic, and there's too much wind shear. In fact, if we can go ahead and show you the wind shear of it right here, we can go ahead and pull that up just to show you what we're talking about. The wind shear definitely is getting more favorable, mind you, in parts of the main development region, but there's too much dry air in the region for anything to really fire off. And across the Caribbean right here, outside of this southern part of it, of the Caribbean over here, there's not really that much of a decrease of wind shear. I mean, it's going to go off and on, off and on, off and on, but at least at a micro scale in June. July is when it really starts to fluctuate, and then into August, and then September, and pretty much the peak of the hurricane season's right there. But what I'm seeing is that there's just too much wind shear for tropical development to happen right now, and there's just too much dry air for these tropical waves to start organizing and developing right now. But what is going to be happening is we're going to start seeing an increasing ITCZ intensity right here. What we're seeing right here, we're seeing a pretty significant increase of activity, at least convective activity, in the intertropical convergence zone. That's also creating a more moist environment that is going to prove pivotal as we continue to get into later parts of this month right here. So that's what I'm paying attention to right here. That's why I'm mainly focusing on these thunderstorms, at least right now, because right now is right now, and there isn't really any hurricanes developing or anything like that, but we need to look at the small things to build up to what the bigger things are going to lead to in later months. So we'll have to pay attention to that. And the reason I'm paying attention to it is because of these models that I'm pulling up right here. This is the CANSIPs. I know we've seen it a bazillion times, but these thunderstorms are what's creating this. They're creating massive amounts of of moisture right here, a larger precipitation accumulation across a lot of these areas, a lot more than average actually. In some areas, up to 10 inches greater than average, which is pretty insane if you think about that. That's gonna cause quite a bit of flooding, especially if you're in Jamaica and Hispaniola, and even into Cuba and those areas, as well as Puerto Rico. As we continue to take a look at this. But the reason I'm paying attention to this month right here is because what this is doing, like I said, is increasing the moisture in the atmosphere and allowing for it to kind of not, for the dry air and the Sahara dust to not really have as much of an effect compared to what we saw in years past. So we're going to have to pay attention to that right here. As a matter of fact, we can go ahead and pull up the Sahara dust forecast right here using the European. Right here, we're going to use the full Atlantic view for this right here. Here's the relative humidity. This is the Sahara dust that we have as of right now. It's still pretty expansive for the month of June, but it's not as much as what we were seeing in years past. And yeah, it does expand quite a bit into the Eastern Caribbean Sea as we continue into the second week of June over here, but it's a lot more scattered than it was last year. And the Sahara dust is also at a lot of a less quality, like it's not nearly as much nearly as concentrated as it was last year at this current point in time. Again, that can change, that can fluctuate, but overall we are still seeing, at least outside of off the coast of Morocco and more so in the main development region, less dry air and less Sahara dust than what we were seeing at this point last year. It is going to fluctuate off and on, especially as we get into July. That's where we're going to have to start paying close attention to it, because starting in the second half of July is when the Sahara dust really starts to decrease, and then as we get into the early weeks of August, that's when everything just completely collapses and the Sahara dust is a non-factor at that current point in time. Just out of curiosity, we're also going to show you the GFS with this right here, even though I'm not a massive fan of the GFS. I think they are too optimistic when it comes to the moist air and everything like that. But still, you're not seeing as much dry air as you were seeing last year, so that's going to be something to pay very close attention to, especially as we get into the next 2 weeks of June, where we start to see possibilities of tropical cyclones starting to organize and develop. So that's what we have going on as of right now. But back to what we were seeing with the climate models, with the CANSIPs and everything like that, with the precip anomalies right here. This is why I'm worried right here. This is why I am worried. It's because of these areas right here kind of absorbing the blow of the Sahara dust, because what we're seeing outside of the main development region, it's spot on, it's right on average. But what we're seeing in the southern half of the MDR, especially the intertropical convergence zone, as well as the Caribbean Sea, a lot more moisture than average, and it's definitely something we need to pay attention to as time continues to go on. Now, this is the kind of the section you guys are probably all waiting for. I've been rambling on for about 8 minutes about kind of the conditions I'm worried about and what I'm paying attention to. You're probably asking me, okay, Patrick, you're saying all this stuff, but what's the risk for the Lesser Antilles? What's the risk for Puerto Rico? What's the risk for all these areas right here that you are covering today? Well, we're going to be going ahead and looking at multiple factors that I am paying attention to. We already talked about the wind shear. We already talked about the dry air. We're going to mainly use this to talk about the warm waters that could lead to rapid intensification, as well as the OHC that plays a factor into that, and possible effects that this could possibly have in the future. So here's the warm water that we have right here. Sea surface temperatures across much of the region right now are 28 degrees Celsius across all of these areas right here, or greater. There is some 30 degrees Celsius regions that are starting to fire up in parts of the Caribbean. We're not just there yet, but I fully expect that to happen in the next month or so, considering the trends of what we're seeing with the waters continuing to warm up. In fact, hurricane waters are going as far north as this part. Where is this? This is like 30 to almost like 25 to 30 degrees north in latitude right there, which for the month of June, that is absolutely insane, because this is stuff you would typically see in like August, not June right here, and that's what I'm really concerned about. Here's the OHC map that we have pulled up for you right here. This is the OHC on June 3rd, 2024, updating that to Yeah, it's still June 3rd. They haven't really updated it yet. I'm going to see if we can pull up an archive real quickly of something that I've kind of finding. Okay, yeah, we could definitely can do that. Let's see if we can pull. Let's see if we can pull up the June 3rd, 2020 archive, because that was our last hyperactive hurricane season right there, and that's definitely something I want to pay attention to. Look at this right here, where we have in 2020 a lot less OHC on the table right here, especially in areas in like the Gulf, in the Loop Current, in the Caribbean Sea, and the main development region that we were playing with at that point. Okay, this is May. My apologies for that. Let's go ahead and move to June right here, June 2020 right here, so that way we can get an accurate comparison, not July 2020, June 2020 right here. There we go. There we go. So this is what we had right here. Okay, yeah, this is a lot better view of what we were seeing. A lot more OHC in the Western Caribbean Sea. Loop current was still kind of there and everything like that, but a lot more OHC, but not nearly to the levels that we are seeing at this current point in time right now. So this is what we are seeing as of June 3rd, 2024. Yeah. The difference between the two is absolutely incredible, and what that's going to lead up to is the possibility for more rapid intensification. This area right here, like this area of OHC of well over 100, maybe cracking 125 OHC near the Lesser Antilles and Puerto Rico, this was not here 4 years ago. This was pretty much less than 50 4 years ago. Now, because the Caribbean has not cooled off, and because we didn't see that much activity in the Caribbean Sea, or matter of fact, not very much other than a few tropical cyclones and Cat 1 hurricanes impacting Lesser Antilles right here, we're seeing OHC values of 125. Now, what hurricanes end up doing, like I mentioned earlier, is they end up cooling off cooling off the ocean because of upwelling and all that stuff right there, which also takes out the OHC along with it, which is why you don't see typically hurricanes really develop in two areas at the same time, not two areas, the same area, like a few days apart. I mean, that can happen if there's a lot of OHC and the hurricane's a fast mover, but if it's a very slow-moving hurricane, that doesn't happen. So that's what I'm especially concerned about right here. And this is already for the month of June, and we're looking at 28, 29, even 30 degrees Celsius in some of these areas right here that at least the sea surface temperatures, because what ocean heat content does is it takes that warm water and it measures how deep it is, which kind of essentially establishes a fuel tank for a possible tropical cyclone to use right there. The only thing stopping this from really being exploited is the wind shear and the Sahara dust, and that's why you don't see tropical storms or hurricanes firing up pretty much as soon as June 1st starts. So that's what I'm paying attention to right here. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to the last part, kind of talking about the threat for the Lesser Antilles over here. I know you guys can't see this very well. This is mainly the storm surge map that I have pulled up right here, and they don't have that applied for a lot of these areas in the Antilles, unfortunately. But regardless, what I am noticing is that we are going to be seeing quite a bit of activity in that region over here. What we're going to be seeing is quite a bit of stuff firing up. The Lesser Antilles, in my opinion, have a greater threat of a tropical cyclone impacting them this year than they did back in 2022 or even 2023. Part of the reason is due to the shift of a La Nina as well as everything else I mentioned. So this is what we have with the ocean analysis right here. Let's go ahead and give you the latest on that. The La Nina is in progress right here. I mean, Region 4 is still fighting for dear life and trying to keep it in an El Nino, but it's fighting a losing battle at this point. I'd say by mid-July, we're looking at a full transition to a La Nina, and we're going to be looking at a full transition to neutral pretty much in the next couple of weeks or so. So what that does is that weakens the trade winds and also strengthens the pressure gradient, at least to some extent, with the Bermuda High. And what that typically does is it moves the steering currents towards the Lesser Antilles and towards the Caribbean Sea and really increases the threat for land impact, pretty much from Central America all the way to the United States, not also including the Greater Antilles as well. But for the Lesser Antilles and Puerto Rico, your threat is really there this year because of that El Nino fading and that La Nina kicking in. And one thing we could also see, especially as we start seeing more tropical waves into late July, early August, is like the Leeward Islands and Puerto Rico start to get impacted by tropical storms or hurricanes as those systems start to move through the region over there. Hispaniola is going to be a bit interesting because what Hispaniola is known for is they're known as a hurricane killer. The reason they're known as a hurricane killer most of the time is because they are very mountainous. Like Haiti and the Dominican Republic are very mountainous. They disrupt the core of the hurricane. The vorticity just completely collapses because of the change in elevation, and that's why you see when you see tropical cyclones move through Haiti and the Dominican Republic, most of the time they pretty much just stay there and die. Either that or they get brutally weakened. We have seen over the last few years, like for example, Hurricane Laura in 2020, moved through Hispaniola, and the structure actually looked better than what it did entering it. Part of this was because of the orientation of where it moved in and how it and kind of the angle it approached and moved through Hispaniola and all that stuff. But still, it's known as a hurricane killer, but that can also cause a ton of flooding and a ton of storm surge, especially in Haiti, and where it's one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere right there. So that's definitely stuff we need to pay attention to going into this hurricane season. I will keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. We are paying attention to a possible area of interest that's the models have been picking up off and on, that's developing off the Central American gyre. And we'll keep you updated on that as we continue to get more information. Personally, I don't think there's much high hopes for it this year. It's just too strong. And there is moist air to kind of supplement it, but it's something to pay attention to as we continue to get into deeper in this hurricane season. We'll keep you updated once again. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. If you want to help us out at Storms United and kind of give us a little bit of food for thought for how we make these videos and just kind of see the behind the scenes of it, be sure to join Storms United. Link to that is right over there. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.